Today's podcast is with Tony Esteves. Tony is a leading expert in the field of human connection, and he's run a decades-long project called Talk to More People, where he's actively encouraged more people to talk to more strangers in their day-to-day life. This was based off of the back of a year-long project where he did this exact thing for 365 days of the year, and it clearly had a profound impact on him. It was fascinating to chat to someone who practices something that I think a lot of us struggle to do in our adult lives, and that is to meet new people. I learned a lot of tips and tricks as I chatted to Tony, and I hope you do too. Listen to this podcast. Now on to the episode. Can you give me a little bit of a synopsis of your life pre the TED Talk, pre the Talk to More People project?
Of course. Certainly. Well, and you heard a tiny bit of this at the event last night, but,
yes.
But I'll share a paraphrased version of that, in that I'm someone who grew up as a very shy, introverted child. And in grade, I remember it was grade 4, I was literally petrified of delivering a speech, which I was tasked with doing as part of the curriculum. It's such that I would, feel like a sickness in my stomach, and I had to get a bunch of help from my mom to even write up some speech that we put on these, I remember, bright colored cue cards. So when it came time to do this thing that I did my best to avoid, I kind of could just read it. But it was like petrifying fear for me as a young child. And then in my teenage years, I was still very much, I openly described myself as a loner. And I had one good friend who, by the way, 45 years later is still one of my close friends. His name is Jude, and he's still a good buddy of mine in my life, who I saw just 2 weeks ago. And I'd hang out with him and him only. And I never was interested in meeting other people because that fear was bigger than what I could imagine the benefits would be. But as a teenager, I observed my sisters, 2 out of 3 of my sisters were quite outgoing and involved in student council. And I thought maybe I could see about getting involved in this, which still scared the heck out of me. But I decided to run for student council. So picture this, if you can, a school cafeteria packed with, about 100 grade 10 kids, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, whatever. And you could smell the grease of the deep fryer, and maybe in my mind, I can remember clearly the smell of like ketchup, like just deep fried stuff in this cafeteria. And it's an assembly because there's going to be a student council election. And then up walks this skinny little boy, Tony Esteves, and he says, hey guys, I'm going to run for student council. Could you all stand up? And, I felt so awkward, but everybody did stand up, again, like 100 kids. And I said, all right, could you sit, thank you. Could you sit down? And everybody sat down. I said, well, if a stranger like me could get all of you to stand up, imagine what I could do in your student council. And I got elected. And this forced me to come out of my shell and to begin to connect and talk to more people in my teenage years. And I went from total introvert to extrovert in the span of maybe 6 or 12 months. There was a real transition for me in those late teenage years that completely opened up my life. And from then on, I got a university education because I thought I needed to get a job out of university. And then I had no idea what to do with my life and a whole giant mountain of student debt. So I began traveling. And I ended up living in the UK around the turn of the century and just working odd jobs after a stint out in Western Canada, and had the most amazing time just living in London at the turn of the century, just in time for Y2K, for people who are old enough to know what that means. and had a wonderful time being based in London and getting an opportunity to travel to many countries around mainland Europe, and really finding myself in those adventures. And there's more to the story than that, but I'll pause there because all of that is still pre-Talk to More People and pre what I've done recently.
And when you were telling that story about getting the students to stand up in the cafeteria, how did you come up with that idea?
That's a really good question. My honest answer is I'm not exactly sure how I came up with that idea, but I can speculate that I was secretly a very playful person as I was this very shy, introverted child. My parents were both very playful people, and so I saw them joke around quite a bit. My sisters would play pranks on each other and on me as the baby boy in the family. And observing a lot of playfulness in childhood, inherited that. And so I suspect it was in my nature to come up with something that could be kind of quirky or playful as an experiment. I certainly didn't have any kind of coach or speaker or mentor or anything like that at that young age. I just thought maybe this would be something different that not only perhaps could help make me stand out as a candidate for Students' Council, but could also help me shake off the nerves that I was absolutely feeling for that, whatever it was, 5-minute speech. And so yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I suspect it's because I was secretly already a playful person, but I had been keeping that to myself.
It's also genius. I mean, honestly, I think it's super playful, but also I don't think I would think, even at the age of 32, I don't think I would come up with an idea like that. And I watched, jumping a little bit ahead, but not to get too far ahead, I obviously watched your TED Talk, which was amazing.
Thank you.
And one of the things I honestly thought was so impressive about it was your stage presence. As someone who now is trying to be better at public speaking and just speaking in general, watching that TED Talk, your stage presence and the way that you get people involved in the story, even that story you were telling there about picture the cafeteria and you're talking about the smells and you bring more people into the story. Where did you learn that stage presence? You're very animated in an engaging way.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. First of all, thank you, Richard, for that lovely compliment. I'd say, so for the TEDx presentation that I did in Victoria in 2025, in particular, that wasn't all me. That was all me delivering it, but that was me working with 2 professional speaking coaches to create that presentation. So for that particular 8-minute and 38-second long TEDx talk, which is called How Meeting Strangers Saved My Life, if you're curious to check it out, there's a lot of work and refining and trimming down that went into that. So when you get selected to do a TEDx presentation, which, by the way, I was speaking with someone at a Chamber of Commerce event this morning, Jennifer, who had also very kindly said she'd seen my presentation, my TEDx talk. I mentioned to her, most people actually apply to do a TEDx talk. So there's more than 3,000 TEDx conferences happening around the world. And there are some people who get invited to speak, but about 3/4 of the people you see on stage have put in some kind of an application. And some people apply to many conferences, and that's how they eventually get to the stage. In my case, that was the second time that I had applied to do a TED Talk in the last 10 years. And they said yes. And it was very competitive. But I'm deeply grateful that I got the opportunity to do it. And when you get to speak on that stage, most conferences, most TEDx organizations have speaker coaches. So who will be a speaker coach for a number of the speakers. Mm-hmm. And so I was paired up with one, which was absolutely lovely and fantastic and super insightful in how we were getting my overall sort of 15 or 18-minute outline down to something that was more like 7 minutes, because I was only given 5 to 7 minutes for my TEDx talk. And I'm super grateful for the work that we did. But then I also hired a professional storytelling coach based in Toronto, who I've known for 12 years, and I've known about her work and the impact of her work. So I also wanted to get her lens on this particular talk because it's such an important opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I had the good fortune of having 2 other professional sets of eyes on my story, on my stage presence, and together we created that presentation. And I'm the one who just had to rehearse it a lot with a lot of strangers and friends and family members, and then to deliver it on that big stage.
Oh, well, you delivered it really well.
Thank you.
I want to say, like, well, you can get someone to coach you and teach you, and you can read about stuff and learn it. Like, to actually then go and do it, it was honestly, it was really, really impressive.
Oh, that's so kind of you to say. Thank you.
Did you, so a little bit of a tangent here, but it is kind of related in my mind anyway. So did you work for or with a circus as well pre this TED Talk as like a previous part of your life? Do you think, I would imagine that something that is like that, like very performative, that must give you quite a lot of confidence as well.
Certainly. Yes. So indeed, I did perform in a professional circus for over 10 years, based out of Calgary, an organization called Cirque de la Nuit, Circus of the Night. And I'll come back to that in just a second, but I want to add one more little detail about you asking about getting to an ability of being able to deliver a compelling story. Honestly, it started more than 13 years ago, actually almost 20 years ago, with Toastmasters. So you've probably heard of Toastmasters, which is a leadership organization that happens all over the world. There are clubs all over the place, and you can practice your public speaking skills in Toastmasters in a very safe and inclusive environment. And I'm a member of the Mountain Mumblers Toastmasters Club here in Canmore, actually. Lovely people who come together. And even though I've now been able to get paid to speak on stage, I can still benefit absolutely from attending those meetings and getting caring feedback on the short presentations that we do there. And I would highly, highly recommend to anybody listening to this, if they want to get more confident to prepare for an upcoming presentation or some kind of talk, or if you want to get into professional presenting, totally recommend checking out Toastmasters. So just want to offer that before I get into the circus.
And the Toastmasters, is that just is it just a group of people that will come together on like a night and you'll all just like practice? Like,
it depends on the club. So for certain times of the year in Canmore, that club meets every Wednesday. And in certain times of the year, they might meet just once or twice a month, depending on the season. And different clubs have a different frequency, but generally speaking, at a minimum, you're going to meet these people once a month. Of course, depending on what your work and life schedule allows. Some clubs actually meet during lunch break in office towers in cities all over the world. And many clubs are evening gatherings, but and it's very inexpensive, like very close to free to participate. And yeah, I'd highly recommend. I think it's Toastmasters.org will bring you to a global database of Toastmasters clubs.
I'll make sure to add it in the description. Yeah. But yeah, I was thinking, and I honestly wasn't trying to bring up the circus thing randomly, but I honestly did think that when I heard you, I think I actually saw it in the research and then you mentioned it last night that you'd done that. I just assumed that someone who did something so performative, that would naturally bleed into having a confidence on stage.
I think it certainly has helped. Certainly. And interestingly, I was at a leadership conference for my business coach last year, who's a very talented business coach for coaches, a gentleman named Rob Gilbert. And he has a concept. His conference is called Do Bold Shit.
Yeah, I saw that on your Instagram.
Right. And so I had the good fortune to attend his conference with a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs, about 65 people in that conference. And at the end of the conference, he invited everybody up on stage to anybody who wanted to speak on stage about what they're taking away from this amazing 2-day experience in downtown Toronto. And I shared that I felt, very inspired by the people who I was surrounded by, because there's many people in that room who easily earn 6 figures. There was people in that room who earn 7 figures, and they're sharing ideas on the stage. And I was like, I'm in the room with these people and I'm not feeling total imposter syndrome. Whoa, this is amazing. But one thing that was really interesting that came up and that I shared on stage was that I recognized through that couple days on stage, a couple days at that event, that my stage confidence was higher than my self-confidence. So because I've been performing with the circus professionally for 10 years and then also performing individually for another 10 years prior to that, I am very comfortable juggling or dancing or doing theatrical stuff in funny costumes or whacked out costumes, in makeup, surrounded by other performing artists who are doing stuff independently or sometimes like a choreographed dance piece, like sometimes full-on theater productions. Very comfortable with that, with audiences of up to 10,000 people.
Wow.
And that's just been amazing to get paid to deliver that art, and wonderful training for delivering a compelling presentation. But at this conference, I realized, shit, my stage confidence is higher than my self-confidence, because when I'm on stage, I feel great. I'm empowered. I'm in my body. I'm not in my mind. I'm in flow. But then I go back to the seat, and one of my coaches, another woman named Michelle, a wonderful person, she reflected back to me. She's like, Tony, when you perform, it's captivating. It's magnetic. But then you go back to your seat and you kind of go back into your shell like a turtle a little bit. And I was like, that's because my stage confidence is higher than my self-confidence. And so I've been intentionally working on that over these past several months through mindfulness practices, through getting on other stages, and through practicing freestyle rap.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did a little bit last night.
Yeah. I took on a challenge, self-imposed challenge to post a freestyle rap every Friday for the last 6 Fridays of 2025 on LinkedIn.
Oh, really?
As a way to get me to tolerate being on LinkedIn, which I've always thought was too stuffy.
Yeah, I'm the same.
But for a professional speaker, it's important that you show up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I invited my community on LinkedIn just to give me words in the chat, be like, give me a word for this week. And I would take 3 or more words. And that Friday, I would spontaneously record a little short freestyle rap using those words and put it on LinkedIn, whether it was garbage or sometimes kind of rhymey.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful challenge. And now here we sit together in February in 2026. And I can say I've closed the gap between my self-confidence and my stage confidence as I'm, stepping into this new version of myself after really facing that fear, I suppose.
And what do you think? I know you mentioned a few things there, but what do you think has ultimately been the biggest factors in getting your self-confidence to match your stage confidence?
Well, there's a wonderful piece of wisdom that was given to me by another coach and mentor of mine named Paul Bridger, based out of Calgary, at a ceremonial fire that happened out in Bragg Creek a couple of years ago. And he spoke about the buffalo and how, so this is a traditional Indigenous story that, I want to say it comes from the Stoney Nakoda people, but I'm actually not sure. So I want to acknowledge that I need to research precisely where this story comes from, but I think some version of this story is in many Indigenous, realms. And that what he taught me about the buffalo is that when there's a storm coming, the buffalo, unlike some other animals, doesn't run away from the storm. It turns and faces the storm, and it runs and it charges towards the storm. And that if we apply that wisdom that the animals are showing us to our own lives, then we can get through that storm more quickly. And yes, it can be terrifying to really face the storm or your fear or your challenge head on. But if we consider how a storm works, let's say here's a big cloud and it's coming towards me physically. Well, if I'm another animal and I start running away from it, that cloud is going to stay over me and continue to hammer me with thunder and lightning and hail, snow, or whatever. But if I'm the buffalo and I'm courageous and I see the storm coming and I say, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to go head into it, well, it's going to pass more quickly. And I just think that is such beautiful wisdom that's been passed down for millennia to make it into my ears at that ceremonial fire that I now share here, because I believe that's part of what's helped me close the gap with my self-confidence by putting myself in places that are uncomfortable, like by facing my own storm. And also by exploring a bunch of mindfulness practices that in previous versions of myself, I wouldn't have the patience or time for. And I think just slowing my brain down has been deeply, deeply supportive at this time of my life.
You said something last night that I hope I remember correctly, which was at the beginning of the connection circle we were at last night. We took a couple of minutes just to sit there in silence. And you either said there's secrets in the silence or there's wisdom in the silence. I can't remember which one, but I remember you said that, and it resonated with me lately because I feel like I am someone who sometimes tries to, like, I listen to like a lot of music, a lot of podcasts, I'm like texting, I'm talking, I'm kind of constantly like busy doing stuff. And lately I've been trying to intentionally put more silence into my life. And by silence, I mean like walking to and from work without my headphones or walking to and from the gym. So not like hours and days on end. And I think it's because there is so much that you can learn if you just sit in silence. You know, sometimes it's not necessarily the funnest experience. You may learn something that your mind might start racing with stuff that makes you uncomfortable. But when you said that, it resonated with something that I was thinking, that I was like, I feel like silence can be so key for creativity as well. You know, if you're constantly filling your mind with kind of nonsense, doesn't allow the boredom to take control and be like, okay, think of ideas, think of something better to do. But was it that you said silence?
I believe I said there's secrets hiding in the silence.
Yeah.
And that's an excellent practice, what you've just described, that I think we could all benefit from doing, to take some intentional time to, rather than have a podcast or information or stimulation going in, whether it be a walk or a bike ride to work, or I suppose we shouldn't be using headphones on bike rides anyways, but, or just in your day-to-day activities. I mean, I'm sure you can agree that fasting is pretty well accepted as a good thing to do, or intermittent fasting at least. Like don't eat for 14 hours each day, and, or even more than that if possible from time to time, just to give your body a chance to process and clean out. So one thing I learned recently from a nutritional program that I'm involved in right now is that when we hear that grumbling of hunger in our that people say, oh, your stomach's rumbling, it's hunger. And you may feel hungry. Apparently what's actually happening is that that's the audible sound of your digestive tract cleaning things out. And that in fact, the thing we're not supposed to do right then is all of a sudden put more food in. What you should do then is leave it another half an hour, another hour, or maybe just have some tea or water, but not more food, because that's the sound of your system working for you. And I don't have tons of experience with fasting. The longest fast I've ever done was 36 hours. But I did find that very beneficial. But I am experimenting with intermittent fasting right now, and it feels great. Like I have a good sense of my body, a good enough sense of my body to know this is good for me. And I believe that when we quiet our mind, we're doing the same thing. We're just taking away some of the stimulation so our brain and our mind can process all of what we're experiencing in this very busy life that we live. And something that really clicked for me actually just last week, I've never said that before last night's event, except for in my journaling, that there are secrets in the silence. It really clicked during about a 15-minute meditation, which is my daily practice in the mornings right now, as I sit with a journal and I write a number of things that I'm grateful for. And oftentimes I write a bit about what happened in the last day or so, but it's not so much about just my life. Like I did this and I did this. And then I often sketch, because I'm discovering I didn't know until October of last year that I can sketch things and I'm experimenting with that. And then I'll take about 15 minutes to put in some soft music and just sit in stillness. And most of the time, about the first 10 minutes of that time, my mind isn't stopping or slowing down, or it doesn't feel like it is. It's all over the place. It's like it's just had 3 coffees and it's going wild. But typically, sometime between the 10 and the 15-minute mark, there is a bit of a lull and just a real grounded feeling of wellness. And I have noticed oftentimes, particularly this year, over the last 5-6 weeks, that insights come to me. And that's why I say there's secrets in the silence. And I really do believe that's just because I'm giving myself a bit of a mental fast. And why I'm suggesting to anyone who I come across who cares to hear me speak about anything, hey, let's see if we can revisit meditation, because most people have tried it. But let's see if we can give it another shot.
I heard this thing, and I'm going to butcher this, but it was a guy, he was a speaker, it's on YouTube somewhere, and he was talking about how your dreams don't come screaming in your face, they often whisper to you. And if you don't sit in silence and give yourself that silence to hear them, you'll never hear them, because they, as I say, they come as like a little thought in the back of your mind, and that's where the seed's planted in, and then your dream grows from that. But if you never have those moments of quiet to hear them, then you'll never really find out what it might be, what it could be.
Totally. That's a really beautiful way of putting it. And I believe many people listening to this might think, well, I've tried meditation and I couldn't quiet my mind. I was speaking with someone just 2 days ago, actually, who said, yeah, I meditated for a while, but I didn't get it. Like I was expecting something, but nothing was coming to me. And then I realized, I had these expectations, and actually the best way to approach it, which I currently believe as well, is to have no expectations. So there is no wrong if you're sitting in silence. It's a practice. It's not something that's necessarily going to feel intuitive or even normal or even comfortable necessarily, particularly if you've never done it before. And like many practices, if I'm offering ideas on how to experiment with them, I would suggest starting small. So 15 minutes a day to someone who's never meditated before might very well be an impossible challenge. But that person might be able to do 3 minutes a day and just see what it's like. And then slowly build on it. And it might not be every day. It might be 3 days a week or something, but like just play with it and or use these apps, as I think I mentioned already, Headspace or Insight Timer, and see what's there. Some people need to be guided with words. Myself at this stage, I really enjoy just sitting with soft music or in complete silence or by a river, like in nature. But I'd suggest starting small for anyone who's considering exploring this silence. And in particular, because I do believe we're going through some unbelievable cosmic global shift right now. I believe that sitting in silence is more important at this time than ever before. And that we can do a real service by reminding people that, hey, might not make sense to you or anything, but like just slow your life down a little bit, take a break from the phone, and just see if you've got some wisdom hiding in there that you're not allowing yourself to hear. And I think that's an excellent way to do it, is to find ways to integrate more of that silence.
I remember with regards to the silence, I had a friend, so I meditate a lot like you. I've kind of gone from, I would do it I did it for like 20 minutes every day for forever. And then now I do what you're saying, where like I'll do it as and when I can. So maybe 5 or 10, whatever. Then I was talking to a friend back home about meditating, and he was like, why would I sit in silence for 10 minutes? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't have an answer for him at the time. I couldn't think, and it was a day later. I'd been thinking about it. It was kind of annoying because I was like, I'm very passionate about it, and I was annoyed that I couldn't give him an answer. And anyway, it kind of came to me. I was like, because you can't do it. That's the whole point. You actually can't sit in silence for 10 minutes. Like you can't. It's a very rare person who can truly sit for like 10 minutes, like with not a single thought in their mind. And that was my point to him later on, by which one time he was like, yeah, but whatever. And that was my point. I was like, you can't sit in silence. That's the whole idea of it. But I wasn't quick enough on the draw to tell him that.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
And I was wanting to ask you, so you then had your Talk to More People project. Can you talk me a little bit about that as well?
Certainly. Well, before we get into the Talk to More People project, I just want to say thank you, Richard, for inviting me to share a bit of my life story in this conversation. I greatly appreciate what I've seen in your work, especially with the interview you did with my colleague from Canadian Rockies Experience, Matt Hollenby, about how you lead this conversation. And so much appreciated for having me. And I also just want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 7 land. As I share that story, I'm aware that there's protocol in how you would ask for wisdom or advice or a song or a story from an elder. And you need to find out what the correct protocol is. And I just want to acknowledge that I shared that story that was given to me around a sacred fire without actually knowing if it's really okay if I share that story or not. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we are here in Treaty 7 territory, and that I do share that story with nothing but love and good
intentions. Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, but to get to talk to more people, yes. So talk to more people. This lovely, colorful sticker here.
I'll link it in the bio as well.
Is bless you, my baby of the last 10 years, and it's a dearly important concept that was really born from a very difficult stage in my journey. And like about a good percentage of the audience listening to this, I have survived depression. And when I say to survive depression, I mean, could have not been alive today level survived with some of my experiences. Even though I had been getting great support from a wonderful therapist who's a good fit. And by the way, anyone listening to this who's considering therapy, but not ready for it or feels kind of intimidated by talking to someone about what's really going on in their head, I'd say not all therapists are a fit for all patients. You might have to shop around a little bit. And that was my experience back when I lived in Toronto. Is my first therapist I didn't feel connected to or comfortable with. And then a few weeks later, I was able to find a therapist who was a wonderful fit, who's someone I'm dearly grateful for. And so, yeah, I had a rough time and with my mental health, and I needed a project. I needed something to spark me back to life. And I'd done quite a bit of traveling around the world and getting stimulation through people and random jobs and living in different countries and some romances along the way. But at this particular time, I was really feeling stuck. And so I came up with the idea to create a project where I would meet a stranger every day for a month, kind of just to see what would happen. And at the time I decided to do this, I had the good fortune to be delivering a workshop at a creativity conference in Italy called CREA. And it was a workshop using ping pong to talk about leadership, and setting your partner up for success, and just a play-based workshop, but really, really fun. So I brought over a whole bunch of ping pong paddles and I just thought, well, if I'm going to be in I'm going to be in Italy for the conference, but then also visiting the friend who many years earlier had taught me how to juggle. And John Stromberg, he lives in Spain, Malaga, Spain. And then also in England. I thought, well, this might be a kind of colorful time for me to just meet a stranger every day for a month. And I'll make a Facebook page and I'll call it Talk to More People and just see what happens. You put up pictures if people are comfortable having their picture taken, or little mini interviews, and then some writing about what happened when I met a stranger. And my business coach at the time, she said, Tony, if you want to make a difference with this, don't do it every day for a month. Do it every day for a year. And I said, that's bananas. I'll do it. And so that began this Talk to More People project. And I did indeed meet at least one new stranger every single day for a whole year. And it profoundly changed my life and my mental health. After about a month of that, when I got back to Canada after this incredible trip, which, by the way, included a spontaneous road trip with a wonderful woman from France who I met at the conference, wasn't planning to do that. And we had this amazing, dreamy time, and then got back to Canada and continued to meet strangers, mostly in around Calgary where I was living at the time. And I only missed one day, and not every interview that I've been on knows this or hears this, but on day 79, I did not leave the house because I was still recovering from coming off the antidepressants. And I don't recommend antidepressants for everyone, but in my case, I'm grateful that I used them. I was on them for a year, a low dose, and they leveled me out as I was told they would. The lows didn't feel that low, but also my euphoric, like, life is amazing, super rainbow dancing on a unicorn kind of thing. Those moments were also numbed out. So I was kind of like just cruising through. I was working at a restaurant. Like I wasn't my vibrant self, but I also wasn't my super low, can't get out of bed self. So they served a purpose. But months later, day 79, I actually couldn't leave the house. I was really not well enough to leave the house. And I thought about quitting the project because now effectively I'd failed. And, the project is to meet a stranger every day for a year. And here you screwed it up on day 79. But instead, I committed to redo day 79. And I did. And it was an important reminder for me that we don't need to be such perfectionists in the work and the art that we create, because this has turned out to be a hugely impactful body of work in my own life, but also in the other work that I've done. And I don't think it would have been so impactful if I'd just thrown in the towel on day 79. And so I continued, and on day 305, I met a young woman, Renee, who I got into romantic partnership. Actually, it was, this is hilarious, it was 9 years ago today, February 11th, that I met that young woman.
Today?
To this day.
Wow.
At a house concert close to Bragg Creek, where a close friend named True, who's a musician who I'd met on day 142 of the project, as well as another musician named Ryan, who I met on Boxing Day of the year of that project, were both playing music. And I was there to shoot some videography for them and to support them. And I met this young woman, Renee, and she and I got into romantic partnership that lasted 8 years.
Wow.
As a result of my intentional project of meeting strangers. And so that was on the 305th day of the project. And I did it all the way to 365 days. And so that was my Talk to More People project.
Well, yeah, I commend you for not giving up on that day 79, because I remember hearing this thing that says, if you quit, you guarantee the failure. Whereas if you keep going, you at least give yourself the opportunity to get to the end of it. And I think a lot of people would miss a day and they're like, that's it. They think the project's over, the diet's over, the whatever's over. So I commend you to keep going. I
was listening to a Tony Robbins talk recently, because he put on this free summit to enroll people into his world, and I attended, and I haven't looked into any of Tony Robbins' work for many, many years, but I was inspired by a couple of his books, 20 years ago. And he's 65 years old now, been doing this leadership stuff for 49 years. He's a multi-billionaire, runs over 120 companies. He's learned a thing or two about leadership along the way, and about embodied leadership and about changing your state to be able to do the things you want to do and shift your focus. And so I got quite a great deal of value out of hearing him deliver these live presentations. And he spoke about perfectionism. And one of the things he said is that, all the Silicon Valley CEOs and people who are building these startups and quickly making really good money, creating valuable products, he says they don't stop. They don't wait until something's perfect. No, they create something, the minimum viable product, and they put it out to the market, and then they rebuild it, and they iterate, and they change. He says perfection is a myth. He says that perfection's actually even unattainable. And we can strive for perfection, but it's not human. It's not real. And actually, it's a huge enemy for entrepreneurs to think we need to look so polished, which I've also thought my website needs to look great. But in order for me to get hired as a corporate speaker, and charge $5,000 for a talk or a workshop, no, you just need to prove to people you can add value. You don't even need a website. You need to be able to talk to people and tell them, hey, I can help in this way because I'm so passionate about this thing that I know a lot about. And so that really stood out for me in his training over a couple of weeks ago, that society as a whole could do really well to take, he said an amazing bold statement. He said, perfection is, well, I can't remember the statement, but it was powerful. Basically, is a crock of shit, basically, is what he's saying. It's just like, it's the biggest failure that we all go after. So, I've heard a similar thing that I think says, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think it's just the same idea. Like, so many people want to start something, anything, and it has to be perfect straight away. And it's highly unlikely that's going to be the case. You almost just need to get started and make it so that it's good. And then, perfect probably never happen, but you at least get yourself
started with the inertia that a perfect scenario at some point in the future might come around if you just get started.
Well, the thing is, the concept of perfection is completely elusive. What I could deem as perfect right now in my professional speaking, workshop facilitating, and performing career could look like this. And I could write it down and I could meditate on it and I could say, that's the picture of perfection for me. But absolutely, once I get there, if I tick all those boxes, if I'm so fortunate to be able to do the heavy lifting or the networking or the studying or whatever to get to that ideal, which by the way also applies in education and getting a master's degree, becoming a lawyer, doing all these different things. Like, let's say I get to attain perfection as I defined it months or years before. By the time I'm there, that is no longer my definition of perfection. The goalposts will have moved. So it's actually impossible to attain perfection in a very imperfect world. And also, people don't want to buy perfection. People don't want to see someone who's, let's say, for example, a speaker or a podcaster or let's say a thought leader who's perfect and polished and only perfect teeth, or whatever. That's not really human. People they don't necessarily want to see you bleeding, but they wouldn't mind seeing your scars to know that you've lived a life that's been challenging. And then because everybody's challenged. Everybody has problems. What we want to do is figure out how to have better problems. That's another thing Tony Robbins was sharing in his recent trainings. And that's the goal. It's not to not have problems. That's a human experience. But our goal is to try to find ways to have better problems.
I think people want people that they can relate to. Someone, as you say, that has the scars that you could be like, they've done it. They're close to where I am, or they've been where I've been, and now look where they are, as opposed to this, fanciful, perfect person that you can't relate to. You're like, I'm never going to be there. That person, I just can't relate to it. But with your Talk to More People project, so this is a double question if I can hit you with one.
Sure.
You said it was obviously a really profound experience. What do you think was and I don't want to simplify it to one thing, but if there was one thing that you think was a key takeaway from it, what was it? And also, second question, what was day one like compared to day 365?
I'll tackle question number one first. So actually, let me work backwards. So question number one was, what was the key takeaway, you say, from the whole project? I'd say, well, there's several takeaways, but
if you have several, please give several. Don't feel
okay. Well, first one is if you have a creative idea and you're not sure if it could be valuable or useful in any way, but you feel called to explore it, start it, talk to your friends, your partner, talk to people about it, and give birth to that idea, because the world needs more creativity. There's an explosion of creativity right now with the artificial intelligence tools that are taking over and terrifying people. But that is also a form of creativity, how us humans are interacting with these robots. But if you've got a creative idea, it's worth exploring, as long as it doesn't completely pull you out of your normal functioning world straight out of the gates, unless you have the resources to allow that. But I would say, number one, don't wait for it to be perfect to start. Just start. The hardest thing about business ideas or creative ideas is that very first step. And physically speaking, when you talk about momentum, it is so much more energy as well for an object to start moving than it is to continue moving. And the same applies for ideas and concepts. So if you can find ways to kind of trick yourself or inspire yourself into action when you're in a heightened state, for example, when you're really excited about the idea and you're in a writing flow, or in my case, I do video journaling or audio journaling to the voice memos on my iPhone, and, just riffing to it. You can then now take a transcript that gets generated automatically and take that over to an AI tool like ChatGPT if you want, and say, hey, pull out the highlights from this rant, the 7-minute rant I just did, and allow it to create something useful for you. And of course, those apps are all programmed to keep you engaging with them. So it'll say, would you like me to turn this into a blog post or a business plan or a pink dress, So I'd say just start is one of the takeaways, and don't worry about what the outcomes will be. Because when I started this concept, I had no idea that it could turn into the most important work of my life to that point. I hoped it could be important, and I thought it could inspire some people to try meeting other people. But I had no idea it could create this ripple effect of positivity where different circles of friends would cross-pollinate, and I'd learn about all these amazing creative events like house concerts, like So Far Sounds. You might have heard of Sounds from a Room or Songs from a Room, which is this house concert series that happens all over the world I'd never heard about, and started getting invited to those, and I hosted one in my own house. And I couldn't have imagined the amount of social wellness that would come to me as a result of starting this project while I was navigating depression. And furthermore, I'd say a big takeaway was that having the pursuit of a meaningful goal is, I would say, more important than accomplishing the goal. And for me, this was a daily project. You don't have to set up a project that's going to last a year. You could set up a project that's going to be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing for 5 minutes a day for a week. Again, start small in your challenges to make it more likely that you can succeed. And then it builds self-confidence. If you can work away at something that you're excited about, to talk with other people about, in my case, I'm living proof. Like, it pulled me out of a dark depression to have a meaningful project to work on. Like, whether I was feeling great or not great, I had to go meet a stranger every day. And so that I think is extremely important. Pursuit of a meaningful goal.
Yeah, I think I definitely resonate that. Like, you said having a goal, and it doesn't even matter if you accomplish it. It just gives you like a structure in your life, like a path, to follow. I've applied that, but in like a more physical pursuit where it doesn't matter, but I've done like a race of some description, and I know
you've done some big races.
Yeah,
you've done some Ironmans.
Yeah. But in between them, say they've gone like a couple of years apart, I almost find in between them when I'm far enough away that the last one's passed and I haven't started the next thing, or I don't even know what the next thing is. See, that period of not having a goal, I just feel like a bit like rudderless in life, where I don't know where to put my energy, where I'm going, like, and I think having a goal is so key, regardless of whether it's a physical pursuit or more in line with what you were just saying there. I think having a goal, even if you don't accomplish it, gives you so much like purpose, really.
Absolutely.
In life.
And I don't think we need to have like a huge project, or we don't even need to be clear on what our life purpose is necessarily in every given moment, but it is very supportive to have some kind of interests that you care about, whether it be in athletics or in human connection or in art or business or studying AI or whatever it is. Like, whatever that thing is that lights you up, that you could talk to anyone about for as long as they could tolerate listening to, that's probably a really good idea for you to explore. If you're not doing that already in your professional work, make sure you're making time to, and you probably are, those people probably are already reading books on it, or reading online information about it, or watching video content on that subject matter. And if you're doing that, well, then that's a really good indicator of where it's worth your while to dedicate your energy, because you will have built a knowledge base about that particular thing. And therefore, you've got some value to offer to the world for other people who might be curious about that, because you've read more books about it or studied it more, or whether it's a traditional formal education on it. And I think we often underestimate just how valuable our just being can be in the presence of other people. And that if we allow ourselves to just be and share what we're excited about, then we can find amazing ways to contribute to society, to friendships, relationships, and ultimately change the world.
And Tony, in day 365 and day one, how did they change?
Well, day one started in Piccadilly Circus in central London.
Oh, okay, nice.
And I met several people, including a circus artist. And
easy place to meet people.
Saw these people doing like performances in Leicester Square in Piccadilly Circus. And it was a busy day of meeting lots of people. And And I was excited to be beginning this project on my way to facilitate at the conference in Italy. And then this whole year of meeting people every day went on, and what a wonderful roller coaster that was. And on day 365 actually took place in the living room of the house that I was living at in Calgary. There was a guy named Michael who showed up to fix our internet. He worked for TELUS, and he was my stranger for day 365. The 365th day of intentionally meeting strangers showed up came to me, literally in my living room.
The universe brought them to
and
you.
I chatted with him about my project that I was on, and we had a great conversation about all kinds of things. And I found that to be just a beautiful way to close it. And there was a joyful feeling of accomplishment that happened. And I think it was the very next day, this is day 366 or thereabouts, that I hosted a So Far Sounds concert in my own living room with many of the people from the project. And then I had a closing party a couple of weeks later, and I was really proud of that. And I did get some media attention as well, in Calgary for working on this project 10 years ago, talking about the importance of meeting strangers. Just over 5 years ago, I published a book called Talk to More People, Change Your Life by Meeting People. And that is a how to meet people guidebook for people who aren't so extroverted or aren't so comfortable just trying to chat up someone else, or perhaps who don't know the current social health research that proves that having healthy connections at midlife is the number one factor to predict how long and how healthy of a life you're going to have. And so this book is a guidebook for those people who'd like to explore improving that skill of meeting new people. And that came in, I just celebrated the 5-year anniversary of that a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I would imagine in that span of time, I mean, stating the obvious here, you had hundreds, if not thousands of conversations. Did you ever go into a conversation thinking that you knew what the outcome would be and then being wrong? And if you were, what do you think that teaches you?
Certainly. Perhaps not thinking necessarily what the outcome of the conversation would be, but I definitely would have gone into some of those conversations unclear that person would want to speak back to me. And based on physical appearances, or if someone was in their phone, plugged into their headphones and stuff, I would automatically have preconceived ideas about what my chance of success of connecting with this new person might be. And I was very regularly proven that any doubts I had were totally internalized. They're totally coming from me, and actually the real world experiences. People very, very generally are quite keen to connect. And there was research to back that up as well.
I've done that quite a few times where I just say it's a guy in the gym, and he's got his headphones in and he's looking kind of like grumpy. And the amount of times that I've had to in some way interact with a said person and ask them a question, you're like, oh, this guy's probably going to be annoyed, and then they'll take the headphones out and they couldn't be nicer. I've done that a few times. Or recently going into a conversation with someone, I had to discuss not necessarily a sensitive topic, but a subject that would involve some emotion in it with both them and I. And I remember going in and be like, oh God, I really don't want to call this person and have this chat, 'cause I was projecting how I thought it was going to go. And it went the totally opposite way. They were like, I was quite fearful of like them being upset and et cetera, and they were like, yeah, cool. And I was like, oh, relief. But it was just funny. I was like, why did I have this preconceived idea of how this conversation was going to go? And it could not have gone any polar the opposite of that. And I was thinking, obviously, as someone like yourself who's had, thousands of conversations intentionally, so you must have had like a very real experience of that quite often.
Oftentimes. I mean, I can tell you, so last year I did a project, I have this lovely sticker on the book here called the Global Connection Quest. And I intentionally, after coming out of this 8-year partnership, I was planning to do some traveling anyways, but I extended the trip to become a 3-month trip, mostly in Asia. And a moment of inspiration through a wonderful conversation with a stranger in a connection event, discovered, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to do my next connection project. And so what I did on this Global Connection Quest was I set off to go to 5 countries to prove that you can change your life by meeting people.
Mm-hmm.
And the 5 countries were Canada, the USA, Taiwan, Philippines, and Japan. And I took 3 months to do this, and I created 98 short form videos about the strangers I met and the directions they were pointing me in, and basically created like a video journal of the whole experience. And that also included some freestyle rap, which made me
a common
very
theme.
nervous. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of what maybe prompted me to think about the Global Connection Quest. You were sharing about
the idea of having like tons of conversations and a preconceived idea of what it would be like.
Oh, yes. Okay. And so on this Global Connection Quest, one of the things, so I recently become single for the first time in 8 years, and that's new and different for me. And I remember sitting at a coffee shop in Japan and working on my laptop and observing a really attractive young woman sat across from me, but at a different table at the coffee shop, to the extent that my heart started beating because I got nervous that because I thought she was attractive, I knew I felt like I had to say hi to her. But Tony, you're not trying to meet a stranger every day. Like, you don't need to meet her. But I was like, no, here's an opportunity for me to face my own preconceived beliefs that because this person was, in my eyes, a very physically attractive person, I just kind of had an assumption that she might be like, leave me alone, to bother me kind of thing. But as it turns out, she was super pleasant and very happy for me to say hello to her. And actually, I believe I just said hello to ask because of her appearance. She definitely, I knew she wasn't from Japan. And I said, can I ask like where in the world you're from? And it turned out she's from Ukraine. I used to live in Ukraine. I speak a bit of Russian, and we were able to speak in Russian to each other and a little bit about Ukraine, specific parts of Ukraine that I had been to. And we had a short little nice interaction. And then she was also a remote worker, and that was that. And I left that interaction feeling more self-confident. I was like, oh, cool. Like I could speak to this person, even though I felt awkward and uncomfortable. And so there's a recent example from just last year, from 2025, of when I've, faced the storm, so to speak, and challenged my own preconceived beliefs that we all carry around with us. And I think that really holds us back from so much of the beauty and possibility in this life is it's fear, really. And what if this person said, hey, leave me alone, I'm doing my own thing? Well, it's not going to kill me. That's fine. Hey, sorry, didn't mean to bother you. It's all good. I could respect that response as well. But I find when we practice, we flex this muscle of human connection by daring to be just a little bit more curious about our surroundings, which is connected to being more present and just removing that impulse to just be on the phone all the time and looking around. There's an acronym in the Talk to More People book called Look Up, and it stands for all these different ways that we can more effectively experience our world and connect with people. When we do that, we learn that skill, it can become so much more easy than we think, but it takes some practice.
And I was going to say your whole project is, I think a lot of people would find, you're doing something intentionally that I think a lot of people find quite uncomfortable, which is talking and interacting with strangers. In that story, you were kind of alluding to the fact that you felt uncomfortable, but you did it anyway. And I was actually wondering, is it something like, do you feel like you're at a point now where you have the confidence that you no longer get those moments of like, I feel nervous and awkward doing it? Or do you still do that, but you've just trained yourself to do it regardless?
I still get nervous.
Yeah.
Sometimes when meeting people. And I typically read that as a little barometer that, oh, you should go talk to that person. And it's not so often because I have met well over 3,500 strangers intentionally over the years. So I do have quite a bit of practice with it. And as I said before, it's very rare to get rejected. Like on my project of intentionally meeting strangers, day 50 was the first time that I actually got rejected from trying to meet someone new every day. And I actually can take the blame for that because I was walking in the opposite direction of 3 strangers on the sidewalk in Calgary. And I was kind of like, hey guys, can I talk to you for a second?
Like, no,
sort of like, they might have thought I was a salesperson or whatever.
Yeah.
And ultimately I was kind of trying to sell my idea.
Sell your soul.
Here's my soul, but
no, your soul. Sorry, but
your story. My story. And so, but it's very rare to get rejected. And so, yes, I do still get nervous sometimes, but I challenge myself to, because here's the thing, like, this life is a short, beautiful, precious gift. And we have this amazing opportunity for those of us who are fully able-bodied, for example. Like, what an amazing gift that I have two eyes I can see with. And I'm not perfectly, mind you, but I can hear. I'm developing cataracts in this eye, which I'm actually actively trying to clear up with meditation.
Right. Okay.
And you know, I can get around in this body, this skin suit, as some people call it, and share my energy in ways that allow me to receive payment that allows me to eat and live a life in this beautiful mountain paradise called the Bow Valley. Like, how lucky am I? And for people who have the technology to listen to this conversation, like, you're in the top 0.5% wealthiest people in the world if you own a smartphone right now, and you have shelter and you have food and maybe you have debt, but you still have clothes on your back and somehow have a roof because of the systems that we have in place right now. So we are in an incredibly rich time in human history with a drastic misplacement of wealth that I think is going to start to get cleaned up and balanced out in the next 50 years, which I'm really excited to see how that unfolds. But when it comes to daring to be courageous and to try something that makes you uncomfortable, I just like to emphasize that we don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow. Like, this is a beautiful, precious gift, this life that we get to live. And why hesitate on pursuing a dream or having a conversation with someone or making amends with a family member who you've been in conflict with and who you feel anxious every time you're in the same city or town or home with? Why carry that any longer? Because heaven forbid something happens to that you or that person and you never get closure, well, then that could then become a regret you carry for the rest of your life. And I have experienced sudden, tragic, traumatic loss in my lifetime and the experiences that I've had. And when it comes to grief, I would say, like, oftentimes people come out of a traumatic loss and will reflect that, holy cow, you know, we couldn't expect that. I was speaking with a close friend today about grief and a tragic loss that we've had recently in the Bow Valley of someone young. And it was very surprising. And so we need to, like, I think we need to do our best as people who have the capabilities to share and express love to other people, to do it today, now. Like, pick up the phone and call that person you've been meaning to, like, make amends with, or even just someone who's been on your mind, just someone you thought about, but you haven't called or texted or emailed them because of whatever reason. Like, reach out to them. That's your intuition saying, hey, tune in here. There's a reason you're supposed to connect with that person. And when we plug into our intuition and allow it to come up more often, just amazing serendipities can happen that can change your life. And I would also add to that. Sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant about this.
No, please keep going. Yeah.
But I would add, when it comes to making amends or just acknowledging that this life is a beautiful, precious gift that is finite, is that keep in mind, if you feel uncomfortable about making amends with a friend or a family member or whatever it is, that it's not just you who's likely feeling some discomfort around that. By offering the olive branch and saying, hey, let's clear this up, whether it works out or it doesn't, you're almost certainly offering relief to that other person. And maybe you don't even hear back from them. And maybe they're not ready to heal that yet. And that's okay. We're going to have to accept that. But you're going to do some healing by offering the opportunity for us to reconnect or clean this mess up, you know? And because that opportunity might not be there next week, because that person might not be there next week.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I have learned as a unfortunate silver lining of living abroad, is that it kind of gives you a sense of what it'll be like when your family isn't there. Because, I mean, I can speak to my family every day, and often I do, but you're not able to. I mean, when I first moved here, I didn't go home for 4 years, so I didn't see my family for 4 years. You know, my mom and dad. And it was not intentional and neither enjoyable experiment in what it's like to not have them around. And now, obviously, as I was saying, I was chatting to them, but it definitely not renewed. Well, I guess it did renew because I'd already lived in Australia for years. I kind of had it before, but not to the same extent of like absence in time, where it made me reevaluate them specifically. You know, I think people can take their parents and their family for granted, and certainly as a silver lining of living abroad, it has changed my relationship. I already had a good relationship with them, but internally I think it changed my importance of them, you know, and staying in touch with them. And I think, you know, something for someone like you who obviously has, I would say, such an understanding of connection and what it really feels like, you know, I would, if I can indulge in myself a little bit here, I think I sometimes feel like one of these people who I have like hundreds of friends, but at the same time, I feel like I don't really have any friends. And what I mean by that is I feel like I know a lot of people and I chat to a lot of people and I interact with a lot of people, but sometimes when I get home, and I'm sitting in my house, I'm like, who would I actually text right now to tell them how I'm feeling? Minus my girlfriend, obviously, and my family, but, you know, out with those immediate people like friends, like who would I text? Like who would I hang out with? Who is really there for me? And I don't mean that in the sense of, I actually believe that there's people I'm friends with now who would be, but I guess what I'm trying to get at here is to use someone who has probably a very intuitive and learned and good understanding of what connection feels like internally. Like, what would you say that feeling does feel like when you actually have a person that isn't a family member or a romantic partner, just like a friend? Like, what do you think that feels like when you finally have a really good connection?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that you've experienced that, because you've just taken the words out of my brain as to something that I've experienced many times. As this like talk to more people guy, can meet a stranger any day. How is it that I could experience loneliness? Which I can tell you I've experienced as recently as last year, like pretty deep loneliness, despite the fact that I have many wonderful, strong connections in my life. And I think in my case, my experience is that when I go into a negative place in my thinking, and I step away from focusing on all the positive and amazing things that I have in my life, and I step away from gratitude, and I look into fear or insecurity, which I can do, I kind of close off. And it seems to me that it's like I forget all the phone numbers. I mean, our phones now remember all the phone numbers, but I feel that usually I get quite closed and I tend to hibernate when I'm going through a tough patch. Even though I have multiple, for sure more than 5 or 6 close friends who've told me repeatedly, Tony, if you're ever dealing with some depressive symptoms or you're not feeling great, please do call me or reach out to me. It's been very difficult for me to actually do that when I'm really in it. And I typically go pretty silent and reach out to people as I'm coming out of it, just to say, hey, just want to let you know I've just come out of a tough moment, which typically would last. Now that would typically last a half a day or something, but in the past would last several days or even weeks. And so I would suggest to anyone, and what I'm working on or playing with myself is to, if I catch myself going into a negative place in my mind, to see that as a trigger to, let's call a friend. And not to worry about if they're really busy or they're running a business or they're taking care of their kids. Just be like, no, they told me, they love me, and I'm welcome to reach out anytime. This is the time I'm meant to reach out to them. And maybe that's not a call. Maybe it's a text message. But hey, I'm going through a really tough time. Could use some support. And to actually put it out there. So, and since I've been doing that, practicing that in particular late last year, I found I'm always supported, and that our friends and family members just need to know that we need some support, and that there should be no shame in asking for support. And so I can completely relate to you sharing that, yeah, I've got lots of amazing friends, but I don't know who I would really reach out to beyond my immediate partner or family members. And I think that some of that comes from the way our systems in society are designed today to fragment our attention and to convince us that instant gratification is really valuable. in all the things that we do in our buying, shopping habits and consuming of short form media and things like that. And that's a side effect of that, I think, is pulling us away from long form conversations like the one we're having now, where we can really get into some depth with a person. And there are now social connection guidelines in Canada. The first such guidelines in the world were released a couple of years ago here in Canada by a nonprofit organization called GenWell. And they mentioned that each of us requires some kind of social connection on a daily basis, which could be small, minimal interaction, like with your barista or your neighbor or a colleague at work, preferably not just virtually. And we all actually require a minimum of 1 hour a week of really in-depth conversation with one person. Mm-hmm. And so I think in our super busy lives and our overly digitally connected lives today, we can easily push away those deeper conversations with friends and important people for feeling like it's not productive or like it's not that valuable. But in fact, it's that deepening of those relationships that's going to save your life when you go through really tough times. Mm-hmm. So perhaps all of us could benefit from just considering, well, who could I get deeper into relationship with as a friend or a family member by just creating the space to allow that time, to allow that relationship to expand further.
Yeah, I think on the idea, a big reason why I want to chat to you is because I remember having kind of like a similar, or not similar, but I had an experience where I was traveling through Asia. I was like 23 or whatever, and I was staying in a hostel in Singapore, and a random guy sat down next to me and he said, I feel really bad, I can't remember his name. His name was Joe, something like that. And he was like, I'm just going to go walk around the city. Do you want to go with me? And I was like, and I was traveling alone. So I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. And then I remember walking around the block. No, actually, we walked for like 3 or 4 hours around Singapore together. Mm. And I remember having the deepest conversation with him that I think I'd had to that point in my life.
Wow.
And the reason I bring that up is because, he was he was in a bit of an extreme example, but also like just as that trip went on and I traveled more and more, I always found that the people who not just instigated the conversation, but people who just immediately opened up in a conversation, as in they just completely overlooked the surface level, like, hey, how's the weather? Where are you traveling to? Mm-hmm. What? They immediately started sharing like personal information, not like personal awkwardly, but like just having a true conversation, like a meaningful conversation. It was almost as if when they did that to me, I felt obliged to do it back.
Right. Okay.
It was that idea of if you only really go into the conversations with like that surface level nature of it, you'll only ever get like a surface level experience. But as with that guy and then with multiple other people, I learned the lesson that if you really want to have depth with people, you kind of need to instigate it yourself, really, sometimes. Like you need to be the one to share something that's going to be like, okay, well, they've just shared this thing with me. Like now I feel like I can trust them and I can now share back, and then you kind of get to the deeper layers of a conversation and friendship, hopefully long term, as opposed to just the like, hey, how's the weather?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's amazing that you had that experience with this fellow traveler. And that's something I actually speak about in the Talk to More People book, is a concept called the traveler's mindset, where for some reason it seems, because I've traveled to a number of countries and lived in a bunch of countries myself and been very fortunate to do so, but it seems like, when I'm traveling, everybody's more open and I can be more like myself or whatever. And I think that a lot of travelers experience that because they don't feel judged by the people that surround them, because there's no longer friends, family members, employers in their normal world. Plus, the circumstances are very different. Plus, there might be other world travelers if you're doing hostels or Airbnbs or whatever, or hotels where there's other travelers. So it's kind of this liberating feeling where you can reinvent yourself. And oftentimes when people do that, I think they're reinventing themselves to their true authentic self.
Yeah.
And therefore you can stumble into really, really deep conversations quite easily and wonderfully. And I argue that we can teach ourselves to bring that traveler's mindset home and we can dare to be a little bit more vulnerable, to invite that vulnerability in this beautiful dance of conversation. And you do have to be a bit careful with it, because it's not always welcome to be like, hi, how's it going? Here's my life story.
Yeah.
Can I share a plate of trauma with you? You know, because we've all experienced trauma in some degree. I wouldn't recommend that, but absolutely, becoming more open to sharing your authenticity and to getting beyond the surface level conversation can invite that back from the person you're spending time with, and make it a much richer experience.
And with regards to people who are wanting to meet new people, and I don't want to keep saying the word strangers because it sounds bad, but who want to meet new people. Now, I feel like I might have an idea of what you're saying, but I don't want to speak for you. What do you think is the most common blocker of people instigating that? And if you have an answer, how would you advise them to get past it?
Fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Fear of rejection for sure. So there's a study called Mistakenly Seeking Solitude that was done in Chicago, where train passengers were people who were in the study were challenged to meet a stranger on the train and to document how they would feel and how that would, turn out. And overwhelmingly, the results were very positive. That they felt good. They were received very well, and both people felt better after the experience. And that research proved that, about 9 times out of 10, you won't get rejected when you start a conversation with a stranger. And then when I've shared that study with people, they've come back to me and said, oh, well, that would never work, let's say in New York City, or it would never work, let's say on the tube in London. Well, they repeated the studies on the tube in London. They got the same results. And that's, of course, because people do want to connect, even if they don't look like they want to connect. And we have this misaligned fear of rejection just based on what society's told us, or based on what social media has said, that perfection in your appearance or your body type is like the only way to go and the only thing to strive for, that it's provided us with a very filtered view of reality that isn't really reality for the most part. But in fact, if we're just human and we're just real and we're just genuine, we can absolutely meet people, even if it's not something that we consider ourselves to be skilled in. And I'd say that one way to get over that fear of rejection is to not go into an interaction if you're curious about somebody, or if you'd like to talk to someone but you have no idea. Let's say it's a traditional networking event or just some social setting. What do I say? I would strongly recommend, don't try to think up a line, just trust your curiosity. And I call this a micro bravery moment, right? Where you can just be present and notice your surroundings, for example. Or maybe you're curious about an interesting article of clothing that person is wearing, or maybe you like their glasses. And you can use that thing that made you curious as your way to say, oh, excuse me, sorry to trouble you. I'm just wondering, tell me about where you got that cool scarf. And oftentimes, in particular, if it's an article of clothing, people will have a story behind that, and the ice is broken. And you can go from there. And using your curiosity can help combat that fear of rejection or that fear of awkwardness. But truthfully, being awkward can actually be really endearing. And I've heard stories of people who've gotten married because they were both awkward. Like, I didn't want to talk to you, but I just knew I kind of wanted to know what your deal was. And I said hi, but it was like clumsy. But then you were relieved that I talked to you because you were also alone at the event. And now we're married and have 4 kids. So, because here's the thing, all the fears and anxieties that you're feeling are not unique to you. Everybody's feeling fears and anxieties. They're not just necessarily feeling the same fears and anxieties that you're feeling at the same time. But all of us have experienced extreme fear, but not everyone's experienced extreme anxiety, but all of us experience extreme fears to some degree in our lifetime, from being born to reaching adulthood. Like, we've done well to survive to get this far. And oftentimes many people have literally survived near-death experiences, as I've been lucky to do on more than one occasion. And so it's not unique if you're feeling uncomfortable or awkward, or you just feel like I don't have that skill. It's actually universal. It's an opportunity for you to learn that skill, to practice it, to play with it, and also to consider how you might actually make a positive contribution to that person's life by sharing some of your words or even some of your awkwardness, by breaking the ice with your curiosity or whatever. They may be just really needing to have a hello from you because you don't know what's going on behind their smile or their not smile. And by you breaking the ice, you could even save their life, So it's not all about us. And it's just me and my insecurities. It's like, think about, I'm floating around this world and I'm doing a job and paying the bills and maybe supporting a family or not, but I feel awkward about talking to this person. And I'm not saying that everybody should go out of their way to talk to a stranger every single day. Not at all. But I am suggesting that people consider that as one way we can build more human connection in this hurting world that needs more human connection.
And you mentioned your micro bravery idea there. Can you give me a little rundown again of that concept?
Certainly. Yeah. So micro bravery. So when I did this Talk to More People project, I would enthusiastically give out a little card. There was a 30-day challenge. So I'd say, hey folks, I'm meeting a stranger every day for a year. Do you want to try doing it every day for a month? And the card on the back said, meet a stranger, tick a box. And it just kind of had an open calendar with no numbers on it. And what I learned was that was way too big of a challenge to give to people. Like, I'm a maniac. I'm meeting a stranger every day, effectively doing 12 30-day challenges in a row. Most people would struggle if they're not used to meeting strangers to meet one new stranger in a week. And so I did have some people who completed that 30-day challenge and reported wonderful things back to me, but not dozens of people as I envisioned. And with the development of this TEDx presentation, I started really looking at this body of work for the past 10 years and like, what's happened? And a really huge thing was that curiosity piece. I was like, most of the times I've created a story or a video, let's say on my Talk to More People YouTube or Instagram channels, or even, heaven forbid, TikTok, it's connected to curiosity in some way. And so I thought, okay, curiosity is a real important point of how to connect with new people. But then when it comes to teaching this, if I'm teaching in a workshop or in a keynote presentation, as far as behavioral change goes, a really useful thing to do is to find out, well, what's the smallest next step that someone can do to try something new? And that to me is this idea of micro bravery. And I describe micro bravery as small, courageous steps that push us just like a little bit outside our comfort zone, but then like open the doors to possibilities. And when it comes to meeting new people, there's all kinds of different ways you can approach that. And if you can find what your micro bravery moment might be, you could find quickly that, oh, hey, actually I could do this. I could start to meet new people for my own wellness and for theirs and see what happens. And the next thing you know, you might have a new job. Like I was telling you before we started the interview, in the Wildflower Cafe, where this little, cup has come from, I was catching up on a couple emails before our conversation because I actually left my cell phone in Ontario before this trip. I'm without my cell phone on a 7-day trip in Alberta right now, and it's been wonderful. Initially, a little bit frustrating because I was facilitating an event last night, was performing at the wonderful Heartburn Festival on Saturday night, and staying at different friends' places, and there's lots of logistics. But what do you know? It's all manageable by email. So I haven't had the distraction device in my pocket. And as I packed up the laptop to get here on time, I saw a gentleman sitting, having a wonderful, what looked like animated conversation with a person. And I just said to him, hey, I have to let you know, I really appreciate your tie. And it was a really colorful tie. And that was Peter. And I've got his card now in my wallet, so I don't have it on me. I don't know I can't tell you what his last name is, but he's the owner of the Wildflower Cafe, or the president of that organization. And we got chatting and just joking and exchanging puns and in a quick couple-minute exchange. And he very generously offered for me, if I ever need a space, he said, yeah, you can host events here in this space. After hours, you're welcome to do it at no charge. And I was like, oh my goodness, because I do host these human connection circles, these events to bring people together to practice human connection. And I would love to do that in Banff. And this is a generous gift that this stranger just offered me because I courageously followed my curiosity and just offered a genuine compliment.
Yeah.
And I absolutely will follow up with him, and absolutely sometime probably in the month of April this year, we'll host my first Human Connection Circle event in Banff because of that random conversation with a stranger. And so I share that story to illustrate just how we are constantly surrounded by beautiful potential that we never know if we stay too plugged into our devices and just follow the Google Maps from A to B and just, do our routine to and from work and don't allow our mind to wander and don't allow enough space for some random things like that to happen. If we're so rushed and locked in, appointment, there's no time for those serendipitous, beautiful moments to happen. But when you create a little bit of spaciousness, they can happen all the time. And I even said to a wonderful friend, Silke, who I had lunch with before coming here in Canmore, I said, I'm probably going to meet a stranger before I go get to have this nice conversation with Richard. And it's probably going to lead to something really nice. And that occurred to me as I was walking from the cafe a couple blocks away to here. I was like, oh, I literally said that out loud less than 90 minutes before meeting this man. I manifested that by putting those vibrations out to the world. I'm going to meet a stranger. It's probably going to lead to something great. And then was able to meet this amazing person who very generously offered to share his beautiful space. So yeah, I think we can do well from considering it. Number one, it's not all about us when it comes to meeting strangers. How might I be of service to them through some kind of information gift exchange, or through to their wellness by just being a nice human? And also there's just infinite possibility in connecting with new people if we allow ourselves to learn the skill of doing so.
And you were saying that he had made the offer of you using his space for your Human Connection Circle. Can you tell me a little bit about the Human Connection Circle as well? I did give the honor of going to one last night, but I want to hear your...
Certainly, yeah. So the Human Connection Circles is a new concept that I've felt called to begin for quite some time, and it's a new connection. It's a new connection initiative connected to my identity as something called the Human Connection Guide, because I am an interpretive guide here in the Bow Valley, and I take people on short hikes and love that work. But I also teach these human connection skills, and so I see this Talk to More People work as the last 10 years or so of my work, and now stepping into this. Here comes the sneeze.
Bless you. There's some tissues if you want a tissue as well.
Thank you. Should be good. Excuse me. Done in one. So I've done this work for the last 10 years with Talk to More People, and I feel that the work I'm stepping into now as the Human Connection Guide is my work for the next 10 years or so. And part of that work, I felt a deep calling to start hosting in-person events again, because I've hosted many in-person events over the years. And this idea of the circle just really stood out to me, because I think there's a great deal of wisdom in the circle. And of course, thousands of years of knowledge has been passed around the circle in indigenous cultures and around the fire. And I just thought if we could find ways or excuses to bring people together in a circle, whether it's 7 people as it was last night or 50 people or more, and make it kind of playful and interactive, but also to create space for people just to interact, just to mingle, then we could probably move the needle on human connection in the area. And so it's my intention to host at least a dozen of these human connection circles before the end of this year. And my wish is to do multiple circles here in the Bow Valley, but also in Calgary, also in Ontario, and also in other countries where I'm going to be delivering presentations and keynotes.
And why do you think that message and that project of like the human connection is, why does it matter so much now in this day and age, like our digital day and age? Why do you think so?
It matters because there are just so many freaking big problems in our world right now. And I believe fundamentally many of them come from people being disconnected from themselves and their soul and being disconnected from other people. And like at the level of like wars and stuff, I really truly believe much of the conflict in the world can be resolved through in-person conversations between people who have different religious beliefs, different overall worldviews. Like if we just find ways for people to speak and have conversation that of course sometimes is going to need to be mediated, I think we can end a lot of the big conflicts that we have in the world. And I think a great deal of the huge, global entities that swallow up 99.5% of the wealth in the name of productivity, but really ultimately is all in the name of greed. I think that these systems and these huge organizations need to and are on their way to dissolving in order for a more equitable distribution of wealth around the world, because we have all the resources in the world that we need to feed every single person in the world, to keep everybody healthy, to get everybody in the whole world drinking water. It's just that there are systems in place that disallow that. And I think in our lifetime, if we could be so lucky to live another half a century, which I'm planning on doing, I do think that we're going to see some very big systems collapsing and some whole new things emerging that are going to more equitably distribute wealth in this world in very different ways that I can't even understand at the moment. But I have a strong sense that we're heading straight into that in the near future.
Yeah, I think you asked that question, I think you asked last night the question of what was meaningful to all of us at that point in time. And I kind of was reflecting on this question anyway for us sitting and chatting. And I think, in this day and age, people are so disconnected. Like, there's that thing where they say people have never been more connected in life because of the online world, but equally they've never been disconnected as much because people don't have exactly the skill that you've kind of spent a large portion of your life working on, like developing that in-person interaction with people. Like I remember, this is a really silly story, but after being traveling, I came home. I'd been away for like a year and a half, and I came home and I was talking to my friend about going to the cinema, and he was like, I was trying to convince him to go and he didn't want to go. So I was like, cool, I'll probably go myself. And the look on his face at me saying that I'd go myself was like, and I wasn't going to talk to anyone, sorry, so it's kind of not exactly what we're talking about. I was just talking about going and doing something myself in public. Yeah. And he was just like, what? You're going to, just go sit in a room with strangers and watch a movie? I was like, yeah, fucking just spent a year and a half traveling the world by myself. I think I could go to the cinema, but I guess what I'm getting at there is, I think so many people, just the idea of the idea of doing something alone that would involve you interacting with people that you don't know, I think can be quite daunting, strange and weird to people. And if someone was listening to this podcast and they were wanting to go out or not even want to go out, but just in life, they want to build more connections. Now, you've already kind of alluded to this question along the way in this conversation, but what do you think is the first step that they should take in doing so? Like going out and actually meeting new people?
I would say, first of all, acknowledge you're not the only person who feels this way. You're not the only person who feels uncomfortable or even terrified or petrified about the idea of opening yourself up a little bit to other people who are navigating this world and lifetime with you. And number two, keep in mind that there are rich, beautiful gifts in you just being a human being alive in this world right now, even if you don't think there are. Even if you're locked in a dark depression at this moment, you have incredible value being here, and you deserve to be here, and people love you and want you to be here, even if you never heard that growing up. And there's a reason you're here, and you've got work to do, even if you don't know what the heck it is. And so if you're feeling called to learn a little bit about how to open yourself up more, number one, I'd say just know you're not alone if you're feeling any of those insecurities or anxieties. And number two, to consider that those gifts that are in you are needed in the world. And even if you don't know what they are or how to articulate them, or if you're really awkward, it's that there is value in you that needs out of you. And one way to get it out of you is to go and mingle and be around other people. And ways to do that are to have a look around. Like if you're into sports, look up local sports clubs. I had a great conversation with a few people at a birthday dinner on Monday night in Calgary, where everyone at the table but me has just gone totally passionate into pickleball.
Okay, yeah.
as you know, it's quite a fad right now. But one of the things they say they love about it is that the community aspect, very community related sport that I haven't yet had the opportunity to try. But if you live in the Bow Valley, you might consider trying rock climbing or mountain biking or kayaking. Like you could try, or there's groups everywhere you can join and even just be an observer for a while, but then sign up for a guided hike or something when you feel a little bit courageous. So you can join special interest groups as well. There's meetup.com that hosts special meetup groups. There's all kinds of online resources that can help you meet people offline. And so number 2 would be, find ways to share those gifts, knowing that you're not the only one who's feeling perhaps insecure. And then I think the main thing I've already touched on with this micro bravery is just to find what's a small step for you? Like what's not a big grand gesture? Like I'm going to go out of the house and I'm going to talk to 5 strangers and get a phone number, which some people would say is a way to really immerse yourself in it. I don't recommend that. I say what's a small step? So you can just start to build a new behavior, which for you might mean just leaving the house without your phone, or maybe even just leaving the house without putting your earpods in, and just looking up and observing the world around you more. Oh, what? Did that person just smile at me? Oh, cool. I was so awkward I didn't smile back, but oh my gosh, that was like eye contact, like a moment of human connection I didn't have before taking my earbuds out. And I mean, I love hiking hiking. I don't wear earbuds, but like I love walking or listening to podcasts or music. I love listening to music because, of course, I do a practice freestyle rap, and I practice when I'm going for little walks in the forest sometimes. But I also greatly appreciate just hearing nature talking to me, the sound of the birds, the sound of the water, feeling a spontaneous impulse to be like, oh, I think I'm going to sit here and just listen to this water in silence for 10 minutes. Oh, there suddenly I'm meditating when I didn't plan to. If I squeeze it into my day, So I don't know. I hope that answers your question, but there's a couple ideas there.
Yeah, I think it was honestly a beautiful way saying that. It was like a nice message saying that, I think a lot of people don't think that they have anything to give or any talents innately to share with people. And I agree with you. I think everyone does. You just need to sometimes spend a little bit of time through like what we've talked about, like meditating, sitting in silence, doing a bunch of stuff, connecting with people to really understand what it is that you do have that you can share. But look, I appreciate you sitting with me for so long. Like, honestly, even before we had this conversation, I think I was already thinking that the message you have is just so important with regards to where we currently are in the world and society, and that idea of building more connections with people. I think it's really key. So I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sitting down with me for so long and giving me your time.
Oh man, it's been an absolute honor, and I greatly appreciate the conversation. And actually, I want to share one more little tidbit before we close the talk, because to circle back to one thing I spoke about, like people don't want perfect; they want authentic. It's something that just came to me that I wouldn't normally feel comfortable sharing, but because I'm stepping into a whole new version of myself, I feel compelled to share right now. That someone listening or watching this right now could say, "Oh, well, he's a keynote speaker, and he's done a TED Talk, and he's got a book, and he's done all the things, and so everything's going well for him." I'd say, yes, things are going well for me now. And I've put great efforts to get to where I am now. Yes. And as recently as like in the last 2 months, I have been on the basement of my childhood home, crying my eyes out in despair that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. And really felt like I'm not ever going to figure this out, despite the accolades that I've received and people telling me I've done great work and blah, 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 and I look good on LinkedIn or whatever. And so for someone listening to this to hear me and us and think, well, these two guys got life figured out, I just want to say that, I'm making some good progress right now. And I can clearly say I'm stepping into the most exciting year of my life here in 2026, because I'm so focused on finding ways to make the greatest impact I can to as many lives as possible. And also, very recently, I've had profound doubts that made me feel like throwing in the towel. But I kept going. So I want to invite people who've felt some fear or anxiety or thought, oh, these people have it all figured out. It's like, it's still tough for me from time to time. But I think that's part of this emotional roller coaster of life. And my experience in particular in navigating depression multiple times in my life, not just the one time I was medicated, very often when I hit a real low where I'm crying tears of despair and sometimes getting recluse and not reaching out to friends as I do recommend we do, that's very often before a beautiful rise is coming where I'm going to be able to shine my light again in new ways because I've shed something, like as we come out of the year of the snake here. So, and we go into the year of the fire horse. So I just felt compelled to share that if you assume I got it all figured out, don't worry. I was crying a whole lot a couple months ago and I'm a work in progress, just like everybody listening.
I appreciate you obviously sharing that story, and it's not a funny story, but it's funny that you say that because last night when you had asked us, you were like, hey, on your sheet of paper, write down 5 problems that you have. And then once we'd written down the 5 problems, I hope I'm not giving away.
You can share
okay,
it.
cool.
You can share it.
So you had to write down 5 problems and then roll a dice, and then whatever the dice number was, as long as it wasn't 6, we had to choose that problem and then draw a picture. And there's a thing of it. And the problem that I had written down that I rolled the dice on was not knowing where my future was going. And it's kind of, honestly, the reason I'm saying it's funny is because it was exactly what you were saying there, where I think from the outside it can look like someone has it all figured out and even they have no idea where it's, I mean, I feel like that probably now. I don't really know. Ultimately, I'm talking much bigger picture here. Like, don't really know where I'm going to live. I mean, I'm living in Canada right now. Will that be it forever? I don't know. Like, the job I'm in, will that be the job forever? Like, I don't know. It's from the outside looking in. I think sometimes people think that people like yourself or me they've got like a passion that they're working on and they're going that way and that's what they're doing. And even when you have that, you still have those moments that you were talking about in your basement, or me the other night, literally last night, being like, I don't know what I'm doing here. So I appreciate you saying that, and just want to share that I am equally as uncertain sometimes.
Sure. The future is totally an illusion. The only thing that's in the past is literally history. The only thing that's real is the present moment.
Yeah.
And we have ways to manage our mindset and our frequency by really focusing on all the good things we already have in our lives and being grateful. And we can lift our vibration by stepping into the feeling of that which we want. You can turn our thoughts into things, but it takes practice and to learn how to do that. And as we close, I'd actually love to offer anyone who's listening who'd like to connect with me further to send me an email. Yeah. So I think I've literally never done this before on a podcast, but I feel very comfortable to do it right now. That my email address is tony@talktomorepeople.com with the number 2. And if someone listening to your show just sends me an email and says, let's have a chat, I'll send a link for us to have a half-hour conversation that the person calling can decide. Do you want to have a curiosity chat, or I could facilitate a 30-minute clarity conversation? I'm happy to offer a complimentary half-hour coaching experience to anyone who's curious to learn more about me, or to just get help solving, refining, or moving forward on a program. I would love to hear from anyone. Again, that's Tony@talktomorepeople.com. Because I want to be more accessible to people. I don't want to appear to be like up on the stage or whatever, and you got to go through all these walls to like reach him. It's like, no, send me an email. Let's chat.
Well, Tony, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.